Betty Yee, come on up. Come on, sit down for a minute. How are you?
I am doing well. It's always good to be home, so that is always the highlight. Thank you.
Yeah, so we got 15 minutes here to run through a lot. You have a deep, deep understanding of state processes, of the budget, the financial situation that California is. We are facing an affordability crisis. So I first want to dovetail back to something that you did as controller, which was as the fiscal watchdog for the state, you uncovered $7.3 billion in mismanaged spending by the state. How do you think the state is doing now?
I think because the state is a big operation, look, we're always going to have some misspending and some waste. And when I look at, and that was over my 8-year tenure as controller. And there were a couple of years where we couldn't even do full audits because of the pandemic, and so I think there's more there. But the bottom line with that is that, look, we're entrusted with the people's money. And so our job is to be sure that it's those dollars are being directed as determined by the legislature, that we have authority to spend. About half of that $7.3 billion was just looking at claims from departments to pay bills for the state of California, and where they did not have the right legislative authority to spend that money. So we're going to continue to be that watchdog, because this is what really elevates, I hope, the public's faith and confidence in their government, that we understand that these dollars really do need to be directed where they were intended to be.
Yeah, so you have a really good historic view on what California's economic future looks like, what it has been in the past. And one of the things that is not keeping pace with the cost of living is wages.
Yes.
And so what do you think is the solution for people who are earning hourly wages, who feel like they might be stuck in terms of how much they're able to earn for their families, and making sure that wages are consistent with the cost of living and allowing people to stay in California?
Sure. Yeah. Let me maybe frame it a little bit differently, Nancy. And that is, here in California, we are facing a growing wealth gap, and it's really affecting our Black and brown families the most. But it's also eating into the middle class. And when I think about how you deal with a wealth gap, I think about two things. One, obviously, you want to see whether people can have the ability to earn more. But I also think about what are the supports that they need to allow them to be able to pursue those economic opportunities, right? So it's higher wages on the one side, but then it's also the supportive things that they need, like affordability in healthcare. Maybe looking at family care being affordable so that they can actually be full participants in the workforce. And so I think for me, it's about how do we create stable jobs. And by the way, I think one of the antidotes to what we are facing as a matter of budget deficit is how do we make investments in our communities and in our people, and really look at where are those high demand jobs going to be in the future, because we're California, we're a global economy. People want to do business with us from all parts of the world, and I believe that we can create those jobs that will actually pay people higher wages.
Yeah, so how do we create an environment in California that attracts, retains those high-paying jobs in our state? And second part of the question is, how do we continue to train a workforce that is capable of taking on those jobs?
Yeah, and they're all related, and it's an excellent question. The biggest driver of being able to attract a workforce right now is housing affordability. It used to be taxes, but I think even companies and even individual Californians understand that taxes are what supports the services that we all enjoy every day. For companies that are here, they understand that taxes are for the privilege of doing business here in California. But when they look at the cost of housing and where their workforce is going to live, that is the key. That is the driver. And I'll just say, like about 15 or 20 years ago, Standard & Poor's, we were in a rating agency meeting because we were selling bonds on the state of California. And S&P was the first to really identify that if California doesn't get a grip on the housing affordability for the long term, it's going to be a drag on any kind of economic health for the long term. And we're at that point now. And so we have to do something about housing affordability, which then means that, and when we talk about declining enrollment in our schools, a lot of that has to do with housing affordability. So it kind of all converges back on that one issue.
Okay, so how do we make housing more affordable in California?
Well, we had a forum this morning with our YIMBY community, and let me just say, the table's been set in terms of all kinds of options, in terms of how we can build housing. We have exempted a number of different kinds of regulations to be sure that we don't have the hurdles, the regulatory hurdles in front of us, like CEQA in some cases. And then we also need to do more in terms of expediting the approval processes. So all of that is going to be part of how we implement all the bills that have been passed that Governor Newsom has signed. But now the financing has to be aligned in terms of how we're going to build this. Local governments have a really tough job because they have a lot of responsibility, but actually don't have a lot of authority with respect to how to raise revenue. How do you make the finances and the fiscal situation work out in terms of how you build housing? I actually want to bring back redevelopment because it is a way to look at in every jurisdiction how you can really, with a sense of urgency, bring more housing stock online more quickly, and not have to think about options like rehab, reuse, adaptive reuse, so that we can bring those units online much more quickly and also much more affordably.
Okay, and then the part about education. We have declining enrollment across the entire state in public education. Teacher strikes. In San Francisco, we just got done with a teacher strike. They were striking in West Contra Costa. LA County is looking at some teacher strikes too. So what is the solution for school districts that are strapped for cash, they're constrained and maybe under fiscal oversight by the state, and teachers who definitely deserve to be paid more for taking care of my kids?
Totally agree.
So,
Totally agree. Like,
yeah.
I'm a product of the schools here in the city, and it breaks my heart. Really breaks my heart. But this is not unique to San Francisco, as you've just mentioned, Nancy. So, you think about how there are cost drivers in each of our lives, right? In our budgets, when we're thinking about our own household budgets. Every time there are cost increases in anything, whether it's our utilities, our healthcare, imagine what that looks like for a school district, right? For how to maintain their facilities, how to look at how they're going to pay their workers and also their healthcare. What I think needs to happen are a couple things. One, as I mentioned earlier, we've got to make this more attractive in terms of people wanting to live in San Francisco because of the cost of housing. It just can't take over 50% or more of their income. Secondly, looking at how we can help the state can help bring down some of those cost drivers for school districts, and I'll just mention one, healthcare. I actually believe there's a model of healthcare that we can assist school districts with, where the state is in a position of looking at how to create an insurance pool for our school districts that hopefully can result in some savings in the school district budgets, and that's something that I know other states have looked at, and I think a big purchaser like the state of California on behalf of school districts, that might be something worth exploring.
Yeah, I know that for our school teachers, dependent healthcare was one of the major issues driving their budget negotiations, where a single person might be at no cost. If you had any dependents, it was $1,200 a month more. And so they were really fighting hard for making sure that their families were taken care of.
Absolutely.
And we'll see how the school district is able to absorb that or not. But along those lines, in terms of funding our schools, there are monies that are designated by Prop 98 to go to school districts, but Governor Newsom held back some of those funds to plug some other holes in the budget and did not release them to school districts. And so to the extent that there are funding streams that are supposed to be for education, is that something that you as the governor would say, okay, well, I'm gonna take this pot of money and like smooth it over here a little bit, and then okay, we'll give it back later. Well, how would you approach that?
For me, when voters enacted Prop 98, it was meant to be a floor, not a ceiling. And when we short school districts of that funding, you begin to think, particularly when it's cumulative over many years, you begin to see how they're just not able to continue to keep pace, just even with the costs, basic costs of services that they have to provide, but also the costs of just operating facilities, school facilities, all of that. I would frankly come clean, because this is not sustainable. We have to talk about how we're going to fund education where We want to get good outcomes, we want to close that achievement gap, and we know that it's not a one-size-fits-all for all school districts in California. But anytime we hold back that money, there are going to be consequences. And so when we do that, and frankly, it's a liability that we carry on the books for the state of California that has to be repaid back. And so I think more transparency around that, and what the consequences are of doing that. And when you have programs that are really trying to do their best to close the achievement gap, and you don't have sustained, permanent, ongoing funding, you're going to see these starts and stops in terms of progress. And so that's not really helping our learners in the long run.
Well, and we need to have a well-educated workforce in order to
Yeah.
continue to attract industries into
Right.
California, right?
Exactly.
So I want to switch gears a little bit here and talk a little bit about your view in terms of, you coming from an immigrant household. Your parents were immigrants to the United States. You were born in San Francisco, and what that, how that informs your attitude about immigration policy, about the Trump administration and what ICE is doing, and the threat of that coming into California.
Yeah, it is a threat for sure. Look, first of all, just federal immigration reform is long overdue. And I don't think there's a mystery about what needs to be done. I'll just share the story about my own family. My father came here at the age of 14 and was in a prearranged marriage with my mother. And his family basically told him, you don't have a life here. You need to go to the United States, actually known as Gold Mountain, Him's son, and provide a better life for your future bride and family. And his path to citizenship, he came over, my godfather was already here at the time, sponsored my dad over. My dad apprenticed in the laundry business and was part of the laundry and dry cleaning workers union in Chinatown, and then enlisted in the United States Army and served in active duty during World War II. And that was his path to becoming a naturalized citizen. It was a common path, actually, during that time for many who immigrated here at that time. So these pathways, and especially for immigrants who have already been here, I mean, they've been contributing to the economy, there should be a way where they can get legal status and be recognized. And we're spending so much more money. And I do want to remind people, we are spending, $45 billion in enhancing detention facilities, our money, taxpayer money, $170 billion for enhanced ICE enforcement. These are the priorities of this administration, when we actually could be looking at how do we support our immigrants so that they can continue to contribute to our economy. And so these are the choices that are being made. California, I will say, we will always be a place where we really uplift our immigrant populations. And and I think we're going to have to be the model of what actually legal status looks like, because we're not going to turn our back on the people that
are here. So what do you think the role is then for the governor with respect to fighting against the Trump administration? I mean, we see how Governor Newsom is doing it. Some of it is in all caps.
Yes.
But what would your brand of leadership be in that role?
Sure. Well, first, as the chief executive of the state, if we're under attack, if our rights and protections are being eroded and threatened, if our federal funding is being pulled out, we're going to fight. We're going to fight. This is a partnership, and obviously we've been hearing a lot more, and people are conscious of the fact that California's been a donor state, and so we actually get less back than what we pay the federal government relative to taxes. So it's to be a partnership, and so when they pull out like that, we're going to fight because it's hurting our people. We're going to use the judicial system to do that, but I also think that part of what we've not done is focus inwardly right here in California. How do we strengthen all of our communities here within California so that we're actually fighting with economic resistance? That communities are strong because we have helped them become, small business owners, entrepreneurs, that we're attracting high demand jobs here in California. And that this economic vulnerability doesn't become a liability in terms of being a target for the federal government, but becomes a strength for us to know that we're gonna have resilience and be able to withstand that. And so that's where I wanna focus on is, yes, we're gonna fight back, and yes, and by the way, as a woman of color, to be the next governor, I'm probably his worst kind of nightmare. And as a woman, I know how to nag and poke and kind of do all those things I kind of get under, So we're gonna fight. I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we need to uplift all of our communities to be as strong, as resilient as possible from an economic perspective.
Okay. All right, Betty, last question. There are a lot of strong candidates in this field.
Yes.
Very divided Democratic field. A couple of Republicans fighting out for their, 30% of the electorate. What is the best case for Betty Yee to be the next governor of California?
Sure. Look, I am somebody who understands state government. I understand budgets. We've been talking about affordability. You cannot solve the affordability crisis without a governor who needs to fix the state budget. Period. Full stop. The other thing I say is I don't need on-the-job training. I'm ready to start on day one. Ready to roll up my sleeves and do the work. And I'm just going to say this, and this is not being disrespectful to the candidate field by any means, but people are fed up. People are just worn out. They're tired. They're tired. They want to see government really deliver for them in a meaningful way. And so as I've traveled up and down the state with this grassroots campaign, it is really tapping into those sentiments of the voters. And so for me, it's all about the past track record, my fiscal and financial experience that I know many voters really care about. I'm a problem solver and really am ready to deliver, results and outcomes and holding ourselves accountable. We should not think about accountability as a dirty word, which has become a little bit in Sacramento because it's known more widely now. It's like, who are you going to throw under the bus instead of how do we do better together with the resources that we have? So for me, it's about the track record, it's about being ready to do the job, it's about tapping into what I believe the needs are throughout California. So I've traveled pretty extensively the state, and also knowing that a one-size-fits-all doesn't really make sense for every part of the state. But what does make sense in California is that we have a wonderfully diverse state. We live in a beautiful state. And the people always, we're the fourth largest economy. We should be able to do business with any part of the world, and we should act like it in terms of elevating our ambition to be a fourth global economy by incentivizing and really attracting private capital to a lot more of what we do. So whether it's housing, transportation, but I'm ready to do that work. I've been on the global stage with respect to some of my work. And Nancy, I just gotta say, I'm back home here in San Francisco, and my mother's 102 years old. I've been an hour and a half here at Children's Hospital, and she just looks at me after every election recently, and I said, Ma, how are you feeling about the outcome of this election? And she looks at me, she says, we know what we gotta do. And in that tone, like, go do it. So I'm ready to go do it.
Okay, thank you for joining us, Betty.